All right. Hello, and welcome to the second episode of When the Heart Leads. I am your host, Dr. Kate Newburgh, and the title of this episode is Heart Creation. Very excited to be here with you today. Very quickly, I want to mention that the end of this episode is going to have a little bit of a guided journey, a guided shamanic journey with the singing bowl. So I'll just introduce my partner here, my singing bowl, crystal bowl. So toward the end, I'm going to guide you to maybe pause, especially if you're driving or doing something, and just come back to it when you have some time and space. So I just wanted to warn you that's happening at the end. Because a big part, as we're going to discover, a big part of heart creation is the embodied experience of it. And so I'm going to tell you some things, but then in order for everything I'm saying to really land, I want to actually bring you in to the full sensory experience of it. So just to let you know. Also, I want to say quickly that you may hear some thunder and lightning. Well, you wouldn't hear the lightning, but you might hear some thunder going on outside. There is a huge release happening today, a huge release. And if you are tuning in this synchronicity, you'll know that it's a really big week for energy. This is the kind of the same week of the Infinity Portal, the Lionsgate Portal. And if you're tuning in across time and space and you're finding this another time, then maybe there's something else, big energies happening, and today was just a big time of release for you. So we're being helped out by the weather right now to just really let that go. So it's a really beautiful time to be recording this second episode. So if that happens, just let it be part of the experience. All right, so today I want to talk about heart creation. And specifically, at least in the beginning, I'm going to talk about heart creation as in kind of contrast to mind creation. And I want to give a shout out to Drunvalo Melchizedek, because I'm going to be drawing a little bit from some of his work in the beginning here, especially as we talk about the physiology of the mind, the brain, and the heart. So that's where we're going to jump in, is when we talk about creation, and I know that, and I'll get to this later in the episode, but that idea of manifestation is really, really big, especially in spiritual circles and our culture. And what I want to offer here is maybe a slightly different perspective, a slightly different approach to the idea of manifestation. And we're going to talk about it through heart creation. So we're going to start with the physicality of the organs of the heart versus the brain. So the brain, as we know, it's split into two hemispheres. So there's kind of inherent, even though there's like deep neural connections and lots of connection points, right? In general, we talk about the brain as being split. So there's a built-in duality in some ways to the mind. And the mind, the brain, when it's disconnected from the heart, from the body, any sort of creation that happens from there is going to result in this equal and opposite reaction, right? And this, I'm drawing a lot of this specifically from the work of Drunvalo Melchizedek. So you'll notice, because the brain is split, when you create from up here, right? We're going to talk later about how you can know the difference between creating from up here exclusively and creating from in here. And if you're listening, I'm pointing to my head when I say up here. I'm pointing to my heart when I say down here. But what happens is, because there's duality built into it, you might get the thing that you want or you think you want, but there is this equal and opposite reaction. So maybe you get what you want and then something else in your life falls apart, or something seems to like come up from behind and just get you, or this something unpleasant, almost you could say, happens. And I'm speaking of this very generally, but the mind itself is Machiavellian. So for the mind, which is very goal-oriented, very rational, very linear, right? We're talking about the way that the mind, the specific rational linear mind operates, right? The ends justify the means. And this is how we've been taught to create. right? In a culture, and as we move through this podcast, we're going to get kind of a contextual understanding of masculine, feminine, and how they work together. But in general, the mind is considered a masculine dominant energy. And as we talked about in the first podcast, the heart is considered a yin or a feminine dominant kind of way, kind of energy. So the mind, which is linear, rational, goal oriented, can become Machiavellian in the sense that, like, whatever I need to do to reach that goal is what I'm going to do to reach that goal. This is very prominent you'll find it in everywhere in our culture. You'll find it in business, you'll find it in education, you'll find it in your fitness goals, right? You're going to find this way that we've been taught to create through the mind. And often what happens, and so there's this idea of like, suffer now, achieve later, right? So there's also this deferred aspect to it, because in the linear sense, the mind is operating within time. And within time, we see things as a linear progression. There's nothing wrong with any of this, right? And we're going to talk about how this can become a powerful servant, a powerful tool, right? But as the dominant way of creating, I attest that it actually goes against our deepest nature as beings, as human beings, as divine beings, right? If all we're relying on is the brain, is the mind, as our only mechanism of creation in this world. So what you'll see oftentimes when you're creating from the brain, and by the way, I am very guilty of this, and I can talk about, and maybe I don't want to use the word guilty, but I've experienced this a lot in my own life. And so I'm speaking of this not entirely theoretically, because I've experienced it a lot. But what often happens is that when we rely on the mind, on the brain, as our primary or even only mechanism of creation, we begin to accrue a kind of trauma around achievement, and even around creation itself. Because what happens is we're always waiting for, to use colloquial parlance, like we're always waiting for the other shoe to drop, right? Like, okay, I got this thing, now what's going to hit me from nowhere, because again, with this duality, even within the very physical nature of the brain, when we create from there, there's always a duality associated with it. So we begin to associate creation with suffering. We begin to associate creation with compromise and some sort of karmic backlash. So what happens often, and I'll talk a little bit more about this later, but what happens often is we become stuck in one of two extremes. And I'm speaking here from direct experience. Oftentimes we are forcing, pushing, striving, right? Compromising, again, that deferred idea of achievement, that deferred, like, suffer now, achieve later, right? And we're in this like sense of just trying to force something to happen because it's what we think we want. Or we're completely paralyzed and terrified or exhausted, right? And there was a long time where I associated exhaustion with peace, because that was the only way I knew how to rest, was to drive myself to that point where I just couldn't do anymore. And sometimes that was an injury if I was playing sports. Sometimes that was illness, right? So there's these two extremes with mind creation, okay? So again, once we go into this embodiment, you're going to begin, and perhaps you've already been doing this for a long time, but we're going to begin to move into that, what it feels like to actually create in a different way. So then if we're moving away from there, right, which is, again, how we've been taught and is the primary way our culture relies on, what the primary thing our culture relies on to create, or we could say to manifest, right? If we move into the heart is physiologically a unified field. And when we manifest when we create, when we are centered in the heart, there's this kind of strange, non-linear type of moving in the world. But what I want to debunk, perhaps, is that the heart, just because it's non-linear, or just because it operates by a kind of intelligence that's beyond the grasp of our logical, rational mind, doesn't mean it's not practical. So what I say is it's no less practical for being incomprehensible to our mind, right? So when we're thinking about this difference, the mind thinks, but the heart knows. The heart is in, as we talked about in the first episode, the heart is an inherent connection with all that is and all that isn't. And so when we move into the heart as our center for creation, we're tapping into something much more expansive than we could ever conceive of, because it's far beyond thought forms. It's far beyond the linear understanding. And so the other thing we find with the heart is that it is always expansive, right? In moving into the heart for creation, we will move into a place of expansion eventually. And it is always in perfect harmony with the totality. So in this way, heart creation is naturally, effortlessly, unfathomably for the good of all when we create from that place. And because of that, right, there's the physical law of every action has an equal and opposite reaction. And that's true unless you are operating from the unified field of the heart. Because there is no opposite when you're in the heart. So when you come into the heart and you create from there, suddenly all that fear, all that backlash, all that duality, all that karmic accrual, you could say, falls away. It just doesn't exist, because the heart is a unified field in connection, in full intelligence with the totality. So because of that, the heart just naturally knows, understands how to create in such a way that all beings benefit. So when we begin to understand that, right, and again, I'm going to bring us into the heart later on so that we can start to really feel it. Because right now I'm speaking of it, right? But the heart is embodied. The heart is still and embodied. But when we begin to create from there, what happens is all guilt dissolves. Guilt around receiving, guilt around joy, guilt around creation, it doesn't exist. Because we know that within the heart, and moving from the heart, from the still knowing center of the heart, we're automatically benefiting all beings, including ourselves. So we don't have to sit there and weigh the scales of morality. All that just goes away. And instead we just kind of enter, it's almost like this, I see it as like a ribbon, or this like effortless movement within and through our lives. So manifestation, if we talk about manifestation, in some ways that's kind of what we're getting at here. But I want to get at it from a different way, because that idea of manifestation is very laden with thought forms and ideas and preconceptions, right? But this idea of manifestation, even in spiritual circles, it's referred to as something that happens in the future, or something that we get, something outside of us that comes to us, right? But and I want to tell a quick story about that, because there was someone I tuned into. I just kind of listened to one of their talks, And it was at this time when I was really focused on manifesting something, and I was going to get this thing. I'm telling you, I was going to get it. And I put the entire force of my being behind getting this thing. And I was like, I was going to get it, you guys. And there's some powerful, like I was pulling out all the stops, all the willpower, and I knew all this stuff. And I still knew that I was creating from somewhere that wasn't really centered. But anyway, here we go. I was really in the process of manifesting this thing. And I tuned into this talk that this woman was giving, and she's this like kind of person that talks a lot about manifestation. And she said something that really made me really angry, actually. And she said, like, oh, if you're really trying to get a thing and, you're not getting that thing, it's not coming to you, well, you're out of alignment with it. And so you need to get into alignment with it. And that sparked something in me, because what I realized later, and even a little bit at the time, but when everything unfolded later in the way it needed to be unfolding, I realized that I was out of alignment with that thing because it wasn't right for me, because I'd evolved beyond it, because I was, if you want to use the idea of harmonics or vibrating or, evolution of consciousness, I was in alignment with something else. And that something else was actually more evolved and better. And so there is kind of this almost like, there's a little bit of a sharpness sometimes to these ideas of manifestation. What I want to offer is that if you're really focused on manifesting something, let's say you really want something, you want to create something, and it's not happening, it might be because you've evolved past it. It might be because you can't manifest that thing because you've gone beyond it, and there's actually something more fulfilling, better, more aligned out there, right? So this idea of you need to try to, whatever you need to do to get into alignment with that thing, for me, that's never been really useful. Instead, what I like to ask is, well, what am I in alignment with? What am I evolving into? And the heart, when you tune into the heart, always knows, right? What it brings to you is going to be something exactly that you need, and also exactly designed for your own evolution. So yeah, if you're not if you're tuning in and this whole manifestation thing and it's not happening or whatever, like, don't assume you're doing something wrong, because I would guess it's probably because you've evolved past this thing that you think you want. And I just created a course called Claiming the Heart's Dream. And one of the biggest lessons of that, one of the biggest teachings, was that we, oftentimes what we think we want, or what we've been told that we want, or what we've been conditioned to want, is not actually the thing that will fulfill us. And so this is where heart creation comes in. This is where tuning into the heart allows us to be kind of surprised by what would actually come in that will be the thing that will truly nourish and fulfill us. So then when we talk about manifestation, according to the heart, when we're starting with the heart, it's just now. All right, so I'm going to try to explain this. You manifest a feeling, right? And and here's where, like, I know I'm skating really close to the line, because in a lot of those things that, which I think are still very informed by the masculine, right? The linear, rational, masculine, right? Like, we manifest a feeling to manifest a thing. And there's still this kind of like very subtle Machiavellian, like, oh, I manifest the peace to manifest the house, or I manifest the joy to manifest the abundance of money, right? And there's still this deferment, this linear, this rational, this step, right? There's still this mind-oriented thing with that. And when we come in to heart creation, the ultimate, and I talked about the ultimate arrival I talked about the ultimate arrival in the first podcast. And in some ways, we're coming back to that concept now. The ultimate arrival, the ultimate manifestation is that peace, that joy, that compassion, that acceptance, right? The stilling within that. From that place, I'm moving a paper so you might hear it. I have a lot of notes in front of me. There we go. From that place, from that feeling state, that's when you're going to receive the messages of the heart. You may receive ideas, you may receive action steps to take, right? The heart, there's still action involved in this. But everything feels good because it's done within that larger circle of the feeling state that you're manifesting. So when you're taking those steps, you're taking them from a place of centeredness, right? From balance. And I want to mention because sometimes we're not there, right? It's even just, I will say, even just the other day, I had a moment where like the energy was so big and I felt so overwhelmed that I was way outside of the idea of like peace and compassion and right. And all that told me in that moment was I had stepped outside of it. There wasn't anything wrong, but what's the response there? It's listening, it's compassion, it's moving into centeredness with the self. Oh, okay. I feel irritated. I feel angry. I feel frustrated, right? What need of mine do I need to come back to? What boundaries do I need to draw? How do I turn towards this, right? And listen. Right? So even in the midst of maybe feelings that are unpleasant, like irritation, right? With the heart, there's no turning against yourself. The movement still feels good because the movement is back toward the self, back toward what would feel good, right? How can I listen? How do I tend to this first? I used to create from a place of fear, and I still do it sometimes. Right? I'm just more aware of it now. Years and years of practice, tuning in. But I used to create from a place of deep fear, and ultimately, it was an impatient kind of creating. It was. I had this I was like this Don Quixote character where I would just rush headlong into my fears. I'd say, is that a fear? I'm going to conquer it by taking it on, right? And I would be like, what's that thing I'm afraid of? I'm going to throw myself at it and show myself that it's not scary. And there was growth that happened there, but what happened most often is that same thing with Don Quixote is I get thrown back onto myself, right? Because there's this stately, implacable windmill that I'm throwing myself at, trying to prove something. And so I thought that the only way to conquer fears, I thought that the only way to get somewhere was to just get into this adversarial relationship with everything that I thought was an obstacle or everything that I thought was holding me back. I would take it on, and it was a battle. And I would make these huge gestures, and sometimes they were needed. But oftentimes they left me off balance. They left me vulnerable. They left me open to other types of suffering. And the impatience that all of that arose from was ultimately, it was a state of fear that that thing that I wanted would never come or wasn't right. Kind of stepping out of trust. And now, when I'm within the heart, right? So again, that's something I was talking about earlier, right? There was those two states of being. One was either like pushing, striving, battling, fighting, or completely paralyzed and broken, right? Thrown back. And I had to go through this. This was one of the biggest lessons of my life, and continues to be. But one, at least I'm really aware of now, was that pattern of fighting, striving, pushing, paralysis, exhaustion, illness, brokenness, right? And I was in one of those two places almost all the time. And so now, as I tune into the heart, as I tune into the steps I take in this life, I begin to ask myself really different questions. I begin to ask myself questions like, what would it feel like? What would it look like to be completely supported in this transition, in this change? What would it look or feel like to honor my nervous system and my body in this, whatever this is, this moment, this change, this decision, this desire, right? What could it mean not to endure, but to enjoy? And in these questions, you begin to make that masterwork of your life. So these questions of what would it mean to be completely supported? What would it mean to honor my body and my nervous system in all things? And these are radical questions, by the way. Radical questions in our culture. Very quick side note, I did my doctoral research on burnout because I had so deeply experienced it. And our culture, our society, the dominating kind of operating systems of our society are not body-centered. They don't ask, what would it be like to be supported? What would it be like to have your nervous system held and honored? What would it be like to have the needs of your body honored? These are not questions that are asked in our wider society when it comes to most things. Most things I was specifically researching, job, workplace burnout, but it's really in all things. And so these are really radical questions, deeply radical questions. And then when we say, what would it mean not to endure, but to enjoy? That's a deeply radical question. Right? So I don't know, this story is just coming up just the other day, and I work at a high school, and I'm starting working at a new high school, and I came in to see my room, and it was, for the first time, and it was very cluttered, and obviously had been left in kind of a mess, and I could feel like a lot of stagnant energy in there. And at first there was a part of me that was like, oh, this is going to be so much work. And then I thought those questions. I thought, what would it be like to be completely supported in this? And I began to ask questions. Who can take this? Who can take that? Can we take this out? I don't have to do it all, right? I can call people in. I can ask for help. And I got a bunch of paint, and I started painting things. And it was just suddenly like the transformation of this classroom, right? This kind of prosaic thing, because I took the time I recognized, it looks like I'm about to climb a mountain. I feel like I'm about to endure, right? What would it mean to shift everything and to actually enjoy this movement? What could it mean to honor my body, my nervous system, right? And suddenly I ended up staying there for hours because I was having so much fun. I was painting things. So anyway, that's just a kind of a prosaic story, but very, very practical, because these questions can come up at any time, right? And these are ultimately the questions of the heart. or there are questions that come from the heart when you're thinking about creation. When you're thinking about creating a masterwork of your life, this moment, the goal, you could say, is to have a bright, fully functioning, spacious, light, inviting classroom. But then the heart immediately notified me that I was moving outside of its center into, oh God, this is going to be so much work. Ugh, I'm going to have to endure this. It's going to be so hard, right? Brought me right back. Remember our questions. What would it look like to be completely supported in this? And it's shocking how, when you open to receive support and help, it is shocking. The stuff that comes through, I'm telling you, I was absolutely shocked and grateful. And so then suddenly this became, I think I'll mention this later. Suddenly this became like a community thing, like an inviting thing. It was inclusive, like we were all a part of this creation. And suddenly it was, maybe it wasn't that enjoyable for people to come in and bring dollies and like take out, old rundown filing cabinets, right? But the community aspect of it was graciousness, was gratitude, was like the feeling that there was something bigger at work here, and so again, a very prosaic, I don't know, that story just came up, that was a very prosaic example, but it also shows how in any moment we can move into this, right? And then that ultimate manifestation was already there, right? That feeling of centeredness, that feeling of peace, that feeling of being supported came in, and then from there, like the actions, the resources, they all came in, but there was no effort involved. It became enjoyable. So I do want to mention that, so just real quick, so to put a little bow on that one, that's when the impatience falls away. The impatience of getting the thing done, getting to the thing, right? That falls away because you're actually enjoying the process and you're actually able to take these steps that feel supported. And there is massive power in that. We like to think that there's only maybe massive power in taking huge leaps of faith, but there is massive power in these small steps that you enjoy. And you're already enjoying it, so you're not in any rush. That said, sometimes there is urgency, right? Sometimes things need to get done. Sometimes we're under deadlines. So when that happens, right, and I can see myself moving out like, this deadline is dependent on this person to do this thing, and I, da-da-da. Sometimes you have to be persistent, right? But I'm finding there can be a quiet presence in my requests so that I'm not hounding someone, so that I'm not transmitting anxiety, right? I'm just transmitting quiet, unmoving expectation that it will be done, and the persistence of making sure it gets done, whatever it is, right? And so that's important to note. Like, sometimes there are urgency and deadlines, but within that, again, the heart exists outside of linear time. So when it comes to deadlines, like the heart already knows how everything can happen. I can tell you some miraculous stories about how every time I go anywhere, right? Every time I get in my car, I have to get somewhere, I just say, please. And I ask my angels, I talk to my angels all the time and say, angels, please get me safely and on time. And then things just click and fall into place, and traffic lights, and then and I'm right on time somehow. And even if I'm like 5 minutes late, I walk in and the thing hasn't started yet. Right? So it's just like there's this, the heart just knows, and it's, again, these are very practical things. Right? Very practical things. So just tuning into the heart and allowing it to move you. So sometimes I'll be like in the process of doing something, and my heart's like, and I can feel the nudge, like, okay, it's just time to move on. Time to put on your shoes and go. Now, it's like, okay, I heard that. That's how I'm going to get there on time, right? So there's practical things, but it comes from within. So, all right. Few more things here about heart creation. So I think what's happening is I've got this kind of constellation of things here that I'm bringing in, and by the end of this by the end of this podcast, by the end of this episode, and especially with this movement into the kind of guided meditation that you're going to experience, right? This constellation will have come together so that maybe one thing doesn't resonate, but this resonates and begins to work on you. So I'm approaching heart creation from a number of levels in this. Here's another thing about heart creation that I want to talk about, is that when you start, right? And when you're really within the deep knowing of the heart, and you're moving from there, and you keep centering with these questions. What would it be like to be supported? What would it be like to honor my body and my nervous system here? What would it be like to enjoy this, right? And as you keep coming back to these questions, impatience and resistance, there's none of that to hinder what becomes kind of I discover sometimes a galloping energy of the heart, and begins to expand very quickly. And your life can begin to expand very quickly with just these few simple things. And what you discover is that the heart brings you exactly what you need in the moment. So sometimes that's a deep quiet and holding and solitude. And sometimes it's this invitation to step out, to expand, to get out of your routine, to try something new, right? And in all ways, it's going to support you in that. And so these experiences, when you follow the heart, they're going to bring you into an expansion and these new experiences that are so far beyond what the mind could ever conjure up. Because the mind is running on what is already known. And again, we're going to talk about how that's a powerful tool for creating structure. But the experiences and the expansion that come from living from the heart, from creating your life from the heart, are going to be way beyond anything your mind could ever come up with. So, I want to mention that I work with my dreams, and this is part of, I've been working very deeply with my dreams, and I'm sure I'll have an entire podcast series, episode series on how to work with your dreams. And, but I just so you know, they're a very, very powerful way to tune into what's deeply true. So I work with my dreams, and oftentimes I'll record my dreams in the middle of the night, and then I'll go back and listen and try to figure out what's going on. But some of them, the message is really close to the surface. And there's one that came up that I want to mention here, which is the other day. And again, this is a week of, and you'll see why this idea of galloping energies is so fitting. But this is a week of huge energies moving through. And there's this dream that really helped illustrate what happens when you're deeply tuning into heart creation. And I had this dream where, if you know me, or it won't take you long to know that I absolutely adore horses, and I've been working with horses since I was really, really little. And I promised myself when I was 3 that I was going to get a horse, and I'm in my late 30s now, and I don't have one yet, but we're working on it. That's one of those heart creation things in its own time. But I have this dream where somebody says, I want to give you a horse. And I said, awesome, I would love to have a horse. And they bring to me this huge, strong, stalwart thoroughbred, fast, enormous, like this thoroughbred stallion. And I know better, right, than to say, bring me a different one, right? Because I know to bring me the horse. But that was a lot of horse. Like, I was imagining maybe something a little more, you could say, in my comfort zone. Because it takes a lot to work with a horse like that. But here it is coming out, this giant thoroughbred, and that's a lot of horse. And so this is what's going to happen when you begin to tune into heart creation, is that at some point your life is going to start manifesting like in the physical all the things that you've kind of been asking for, but you will be amazed at the way and the form that they come forward, because they're often going to ask you to grow. So like they're going to ask you to expand, to become more aware of your own power, right? So this huge thoroughbred, I finally received a horse. It was this huge thoroughbred, right? And I suddenly had to step up into, an understanding that, because this is how life has been feeling lately. All the things I've been asking for suddenly come crashing in. And there's a part of me that almost feels a little overwhelmed. And then there's a part of me that says, no, like this is what I've been asking for. And what happens is that what I'm noticing is that the more I open to what life wants to bring me, and the bigger things get, the less I'm able to do it alone. And this again was a theme in the last episode, the first episode, but the previous episode was how we come back to like not being able to do things alone. And so suddenly this heart creation is so expansive that it's expanding me beyond what I can handle just by myself. And it's forcing me in some ways to ask for help, to ask for support, to ask those questions. What would it feel like to be completely supported in this expansion that's happening? Right? And so then what happens is it's like an invitation. It's inclusive. It like this heart creation, this expansion of your own, what you might think of as your own personal life, becomes an inclusive space where others can step in, where others can shine, where others can give their gifts. And because you know that it's all coming from this centered place, you know that this receiving of support is an amplification. It's an amplification of joy. It's an amplification of strength and power and other people's discovery of their own, what they have to give. And so it becomes this whole, it becomes communal. So it happens naturally with this expansion, because your heart is always going to lead you beyond what you think you can do just on your own, what's possible for you to do just on your own. So we're going to do a very quick recap before I kind of move into the last part of this. We've got the mind versus heart creation. We've got the mind creation, which is linear, where the steps feel like you already know the steps, what steps you need to take. You go through those steps, you get the thing, right? And for some things, that's okay. But oftentimes, especially when we're too focused on that, or that's our only mechanism of creation, and when we're too focused on that, to the exclusion of the body, of the heart, of the nervous system, right, of the deeper movements of the soul, there's going to be some sort of backlash that comes to you from that. And it's just kind of how things work, right? And there's going to be there's going to oftentimes be a suffering associated with it. There's going to be a like an endure now, achieve later, right? There's a lot of that. So when we're creating from the mind, there's a specific feeling tone to it in the body, versus when we center in the heart. And I'm going to talk a little bit about what that feels like, and then we're going to move into it. When we center in the heart, the questions are how to bring this moment back to support, enjoyment, deep listening, right? Even if the moment is unpleasant, the heart knows how to bring it into a space so that there's a nourishing or a nurturing or a support that can happen there, right? A turning towards a compassion, right? That takes away the sharpness. So the heart is always manifesting in that way. Then from there, from those simple questions, how can I be supported in this? How can I be more comfortable? How can I enjoy this? What would be better for my nervous system? What would be better for my body, right? These simple questions. From there, the actual physical world begins to, the actual physical world begins to respond to that. And that's when you begin to see in the physical world all these things coming to you or showing up, right? And we know that within the heart we can receive those things without guilt, because the heart is naturally attuned with this deep connection and intelligence to all beings and all things, to the totality. So we know that when we're moving from the heart, there will never be an equal and opposite reaction, because the heart is a unified field. So that's kind of a recap. And then, what does it feel like? So there's a centeredness. There's a knowing. There's a deep listening that happens when we're there. There's almost like a sumptuousness or there's an embodied aspect of it where your body is part of this totality and a very powerful instrument. And you'll be able to tell the moment you step out of your center, because you'll feel it. There's an obsession, a constriction, there's a fear that comes up. And with heart creation, there is no fear, right? Because as we were saying, the ultimate arrival is already achieved. In peace, in joy, in connection, in compassion, in a turning towards, right? Turning towards yourself, not turning against. Oh, I got so frustrated and irritated. That's so low vibe, da-da-da, right? No, oh, I got frustrated and irritated. Where did I say yes when I should have said no? Where did I need to draw a boundary, right? So there's this listening and this compassion that never, ever, ever uses blame, shame, judgment, or criticism, right? So all that sharpness is taken away. So anything that comes from that place is merely an amplifier, because you have already centered in here. So then whatever emerges is an amplifier, an invitation. And from that place, the mind begins to come into trusting service of the heart. It stops trying to take over. And more, as you tune into your heart, your mind is going to begin to relax and to trust. Right? The more we do this, the mind, it feels too good to do anything else, honestly, the more you do it. And so the mind stops trying to take over. The body talks to you and you listen. Things feel right. They feel enjoyable. They feel easy. If they don't, you listen, you recalibrate, right? But this is how each moment becomes like a bead strung in the masterwork of your life. Each perfect encapsulated moment, right, becomes exquisite. And patience, even desire, although there might be this deep kindling of longing, all of that is kind of fading into the background in the face of what is just this present embodied joy. And the heart will lead you into that. It nourishes you, and within it you feel safe, loved, supported, and held. So heart creation. All right. I'm going to cue you now to, if you are listening to this, taking a walk, I don't know, running or driving or whatnot, just pause it, because I'm going to bring us into a meditative state. And I would say come back to this these last kind of 10 minutes or so, when you have a chance to be kind of still and quiet, either lying down or sitting. What a beautiful time for the, I don't know if you can hear the thunder in the background. It's a beautiful time for the thunder to pick up. So because of this, I normally do like an outro, but I won't do the outro this time because I don't want to jar you out of this state. I will say that as I bring you in, this is a different brainwave state, kind of a different embodied state that we're about to enter into. And you may at the end want to take time to journal or write. Right, so you might want to have that handy or do a voice recording of what emerges. Because again, when you're in this space of the heart, right, this is when the deeply true messages of your being and of your life begin to surface, right, beyond what your mind thinks. So, all right, I'm going to start to bring us in now. We're going to experience the sacred space of the heart in this. Settle in. Into your body. And we're going to take 3 deep breaths together. You may have some breaths in between these breaths, and that's just fine. Together 3 deep conscious breaths. So take a nice deep inhale. And on your exhale, let all the tension flow out of your body. Your muscles, all the tension just flowing out on your breath. This leaves your body open and supple and relaxed. And take another nice deep breath in. Breath, on this out breath, let all of the heaviness in your emotional body just flow out. So any emotion or feeling that might be sharp or dense, just let it go. As it does, you feel irradiated with a sense of peace, and receptivity. Take one more nice deep breath in. On this out breath, let all of your thoughts float away. sloughed off like leaves in the autumn, just falling, floating. These thoughts that don't belong to this moment, this time. And as your thoughts float away, your whole brain relaxes. You can feel the muscles around your eyes relaxing. And your mind becomes open and spacious and uncluttered and bright. To rest here in this supple, open receptivity. We will now enter the sacred space of the heart. We will do this in the way that was taught so long ago in the ancient lineage of the Essenes and the Magdalens. Begin to bring your awareness, your conscious awareness, begin to bring it down so that it rests behind the back of your physical heart. So let your consciousness slide down so that it is resting at the back of your physical heart. So you're looking there, and as you look at the back side of your physical heart, you see in front of you a door. See, sense, or feel this door. And as you become aware of it, it opens. As it opens, you are drawn effortlessly through the door. Let yourself, without thinking, without trying, just be drawn through that door. You arrive in the sacred space of your heart. This is your own internal sanctuary, your Garden of Eden, a space inviolable. As you arrive in the sacred space of your heart, you know that it will bring you everything you need in this moment. If it is dark, ask that the lights be turned on. As this space is illumined, take some time here. Sense, see, feel, or know what form it's taking today. How does it feel to be there? Are you alone, or are there beings or animals? Allow your inner senses to open. Just take a few moments now to explore the sacred space of your heart. Slowly, without opening your eyes, Begin to bring yourself back into your physical body. Knowing that the sacred space of the heart is always available to you. You know the way in. Take a moment to bring your hands to either hold or gently tap a place on your body. This tapping, this holding helps to anchor the feeling and the knowings that you received in that place from where your life is created. Take some time before moving back into your day or your night. Take some time to write or journal or make a voice recording of what you saw, felt, heard, or came to know in that time to help anchor the experience. Know that you are deeply precious and loved. From my heart to yours. Till next time.